Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we have Dorothy Owen, the chair of the West Point Community Council, to kick us off.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our community webinar entitled Crossing County Lines. We named it that because it's about the proposed North Salt Lake annexation that crosses the Salt Lake County, Davis County border, but also because this webinar aims to build strong lines of communication across the many government agencies impacted by this proposal. At last count, we counted 10 such entities. By entangling these lines early in the next phase, we hope to prevent misunderstandings and build strong relationships. We know that informed community dialogue can result in positive changes. That is what happened after our first community meeting on this issue last December. People asked questions and voiced their concerns. Subsequently, the Salt Lake County Council denied the initial annexation resolution, and the proposal was revised to include some changes recommended by the community. In July, the County Council allowed the City of North Salt Lake to consider this revised annexation proposal. During the second phase of this lengthy process, we believe expanded community involvement will continue to improve this process and any subsequent action. This webinar is being hosted by West Point Community Council with critical support from involved residents of North Salt Lake and the staff at Salt Lake City Library Services. So a special shout out of appreciation to Elizabeth King and Patrick Hutchings there with Salt Lake City Library Services. They've been excellent to work with, and we would strongly recommend that you consider them in the future if you have a similar type of event that you want to do. I will be moderating the first part of this webinar and want to start it out by reminding you that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Westbrook Facebook page. It will be available to view on our website. Yep, it is. And we will show you the link on one of the pages here at the end of the webinar, so you can go to the recording. We have planned 3 Q&A sessions at different points in the webinar. Allison Muser of West Point and Angie Keaton of North Salt Lake City will be reviewing and compiling the questions and comments as they're submitted. They will be accepting questions via the Q&A feature within Zoom, where you can type your question. If you are joining by phone, you can email your questions directly to info@westpointcc.org. And again, we'll show you those links so you can refer to them. Once received, Allison and Angie will identify the most frequent questions which have not been addressed and can be answered within the allotted time. We will do our best to get to as many questions as we can. Just realize that this is not the first or the last meeting, and there will be times to follow up on questions that don't get answered. When submitting a question or comment, please first identify yourself. 2, type in your question or comment, clearly stating the question first if you're doing both a question and a comment. And then, if applicable, identify the person or persons to whom you are directly addressing the question to. Please know that all submitted questions and comments will be compiled in a written summary that will be sent to the City of North Salt Lake and posted on our website. Furthermore, specific questions will be referred to the identified person or to the person who is determined best equipped to respond. So with that, let's get started. We'll begin with a slide presentation, which will be presented by North Salt Lake. And basically we are asking for Sherry Llewellyn, who's their community development director, who will be making that presentation. And then Sherry will direct the rest of the North Salt Lake presentation from her end, which will include a number of other people from North Salt Lake. There'll be a Q&A session afterwards. So, and then from there, we will go to our 2 panels. There'll be a Q&A after each one of those, and then we'll have a wrap up by Angie Keaton. So with that, Sherry, take it away.
Thank you, Dorothy, and thanks for inviting us to participate in your meeting. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what's happened up to this point and then what the strategy will be moving forward. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay. So this is just an outline of what I'm going to discuss. I'm going to go do an overview of the proposal as it stands today, talk about the county resolution, next talk about our annexation policy plan update, and then the next steps with the actual annexation petition, development agreement, and annexation ordinance. Next slide. Okay, so this is an overview of the annexations areas that are requesting annexation. The green area is the properties owned by Cross E Ranch and the Hinckley Brothers. And then the pink one is Misty River, which is the property and holdings that will be developed 125 acres into single family and attached single family development. Next. The original request for annexation included all of the properties that you see on this map that are in purple. Those areas have been removed from the annexation as they're defined as rural real property by the Utah State Code. And we have to have 100% of those property owners, which the developer did not have. And so those have been removed. That was a request also from the Salt Lake County Council, I believe. We didn't want to have anyone that didn't want to be considered for annexation in the proposal. So those purple properties have been removed, or any properties that became not contiguous once the property owners that didn't want to be included in the annexation were removed. Next. So I just wanted to give us an overview of the distances here, just so you could get an idea of where these properties are located in reference to other places around. I did a 1.5 mile radius from the center of what will be the Misty River development proposal. And that's about to, and as the crow flies, to Lee's Market, if you're familiar with that. And then also to the neighborhoods that are within the North or West Point Community Council's jurisdiction. Next slide. So we have received this draft concept. This is a very rough draft of the development pattern that Cross E Ranch is looking at. This is, again, is very rough, and this is the first blush, and it's the first time I've seen this was a couple days ago. But they're working on a more formal proposal of what they would like to do with their property. Essentially, they want to have some mix of residential uses, some commercial uses, to do some agritourism, to do like a reception center, maybe some food stores, and then expand their facilities for their festivals that they have during the year. We will have a better graph of this in a, like I said, in a couple of weeks is what I was told. So next. So the draft concept for the Misty River development is shown on this slide. Again, it's 125 acres. It contains 994 dwelling units. Of those dwelling units is 533 townhomes and 461 single family homes. The lot sizes range from 2,700 square feet to 4,500 square feet. And in this current proposal, there's a charter school site, some parks and trails that amount to 18% of the property. And the overall density of this project would be 8 dwelling units per acre as currently proposed. And what I would like to just say about the concept plan is that this is just a concept plan. The city of North Salt Lake has not reviewed this. We haven't analyzed it. That comes later in the process. This is just what the developer is proposing right now. This may not be what gets approved, if anything gets approved. So just to make you aware, that is very, conceptual. Okay, so there was a county resolution. When you annex land from a county of the first class across the county line, it requires a resolution from the Salt Lake County Council, which was granted on July 21st, 2020. Originally, they denied approving a resolution about a year earlier. I'm not sure what happened in between the interim, but they worked on meeting with the West Point Council, reducing some of their numbers. They had originally on their proposal, I think around 1,280 dwelling units. So they reduced it down to 944 and put the charter school location in there to address some of the concerns that have been raised. I just wanted to say a couple things about the resolution. The resolution that the county took is not an approval of the annexation. And I think there's some misconception out there that because the county passed that resolution that somehow that approves the annexation and that it's a done deal. The resolution only allows North Salt Lake to consider a petition for annexation, and it has no reflection on what the council will do at the end of this process when they make their final decision whether to annex or not. Next slide. So the next step now that the Salt Lake County Council gave that resolution is that we need to, as a city, update our annexation policy plan. Our current annexation policy map shows 3 areas of expansion, and this property that is proposed for development is not within our plan. So as part of that, next slide, we are looking at considering an update to our annexation policy plan and our expansion areas. So you'll see on this map, we have areas A, B, and C that are currently in our study, and area D encompasses the Crossy Ranch property and the Misty River property, as well as the original properties that were being considered in the annexation petition. And the only reason why we're doing that is because we want to make sure that if in the future some of those property owners would like to ask for annexation, that we will have already studied it. So these are the study areas that the plan will be taking place. Go ahead, next slide. So just to let you know what an annexation policy plan requires, it requires, of course, the map that shows the expansion areas. It requires a statement that guides the future annexation petitions and addresses the character of the community, addresses the need for municipal services in that area of the unincorporated county. It needs to describe the city's plan for the future extension of those municipal services, and then describe the methods that the city would propose for financing those services. It also needs to estimate the tax consequences to residents in the city and in the annexation area, and compile a list of the interests of all of the affected entities that Dorothy made reference to in her opening remarks. It also needs to explain why properties are excluded if they are currently developed. So this really wouldn't apply in this case. If there's some current urban development and you're doing an annexation area and you don't include that, then you have to explain why you didn't. And then it needs to have some statements that address the concerns of the affected entities. So when we took a look at our annexation policy plan, it was written in 2003, at which time that plan did not address the issues as thoroughly as state code requires today. So this is a need that we have in our community to update this plan. Next. So in order to move ahead with this update, North Salt Lake requested Lewis Young Robertson and Birmingham to give us a proposal to update our plan. They looked at the scope of the project and gave us a proposal for $15,250. As we looked at our current plan and the requirements of state code, we determined as a city that it would be wise to, at the same time we were doing the study on the proposed area D, that we updated areas A, B, and C and provide the analysis for annexation of those areas, should those areas be considered at a future date. And they provided us with a revised estimate that included those costs, and it was an additional $7,400. So North Salt Lake then entered into a contract with Lewis Young to prepare the update of the plan. We also entered into a contract with Excel Development to reimburse the city for the original $15,250. The reason that we did this is we didn't feel that the cost burden of the study should be borne by the citizens of North Salt Lake. We felt that the developer should pay for that study because we wouldn't be doing the study if he wasn't interested in annexing the property. And there clearly wouldn't be any need to update it for that area without this proposal. So in our contract, we were very clear that the city council is under no expectations to approve an amendment to the plan, nor to approve the annexation at the end of the day. Next slide. So the reason that we are updating our policy plan, first and foremost, is to be able to make informed, data-driven decisions when considering that amendment to the plan, and then also to have, the same data-driven decisions when considering future annexation applications. We also needed to identify the interests of all the affected entities and the fiscal impacts. And so in order for the city council to decide whether or not they should annex any property that is adjacent to our city, this update to the plan will give them the tools to make that decision and not just, just give them facts that they need to review. And so that's why we're doing the plan. Next. So this is a brief outline of the steps in the annexation. The first step with our consultant is to identify the affected entities and stakeholders, which we are putting together lists, and the consultant is making appointments with all of the various entities. They've met with the fire district in Davis County, the South Davis Metro Fire, as well as the sewer district and other entities, and they can comment a little more on who they have contacted so far. They're not done collecting their data. They are right in the middle of collecting all of the data. Once the data is all collected, they will analyze and model that data, and I will let them explain that just a little bit further. I believe that TJ is on this call. If he could jump in here and explain what Lewis Young does to collect the data and maybe give you a little bit of background on their process.
Hello, my name is TJ. I'm with Lewis & Young. And yes, so we have begun meeting with affected entities and stakeholders. We have met with the sewer district, the fire department, police department, and we've talked with city staff about the water needs and what they're expecting. And so yeah, these are very initial meetings, and we're working through that. We need to meet with them, then contact the developers through the city, and then get more information so that they can give us a good idea of what will be needed by the city if they annex the area. As far as analyzing and modeling the data, we will do a cost benefit analysis. So we will estimate things such as property tax, sales tax, franchise tax, so gas and electric, all of the general fund revenues, and then we'll also analyze the costs that it might cost to the city. So that's a big reason that we meet with the fire department and the sewer district and the police department, so that we can work with both the city and the developer to get an accurate calculation of the cost and benefits, and ultimately show how feasible the project is. So that's step 3, analyzing and modeling the data. Draft proposed amendment to the plan. So we'll prepare that draft. Step 5, so we'll present the plan to the Planning Commission and public for review. And so they'll look through that plan and then provide comments, and then we'll use that feedback and go from there. So next slide. So step 6 is notification to affected entities and public meeting with Planning Commission. And that notification is required to be in that 14-day period. Step 7 is a Planning Commission public meeting, accept input on draft plan, and then they'll accept input for 10 days after the meeting. And then based on the input that they received, the Planning Commission may modify the plan based upon the input. Step 8, the Planning Commission will have a public hearing and give a 14-day notice. Planning Commission may modify plan based upon input at public hearing and make recommendations to the City Council. Step 9, the City Council will do a public hearing with a 14-day notice. They may modify the plan based upon public input, and the City Council adopts a resolution amending the plan. And then step 10, the property owners may file annexation petition with the city. Okay, and then
Back in here, TJ, if that's okay.
yeah, go for it.
So at this stage in the process where we're on step 2, we have not received a formal petition of annexation from the property owners. The property, any development on this property, it will not take place until after we have, and if the City Council amends the annexation policy plan to include this property. If the data in the study reveals that it's not fiscally beneficial to the city and the City Council decides that they are not interested in annexing it, then they will not amend the plan. But if they do not amend the plan, then they cannot file a petition, and they cannot file the petition until we have amended the plan. If the City Council does amend the plan and they receive a petition, if you could go forward 2 slides. The other direction. Next one. Okay, so once the plan, the annexation policy plan is updated, this would be the steps in the actual annexation and development review. So the annexation petition would be filed by the sponsor, and copies would be sent to Salt Lake County. The City Council has 14 days to either accept the petition or deny the petition for consideration. If they accept the petition at this state, all that means is that they are accepting the petition to consider for annexation. It is not the final step in the annexation. It's the very first step as far as when the petition getting filed. Once the City Council accepts a petition, the city recorder certifies the petition for accuracy with the state code, and then posts and mails various notices in the newspaper as well as to property owners. That starts a 30-day protest periods. If there are protests filed, there's certain requirements under state code that I won't go into as to who can file a protest of the annexation petition. And if that is filed, then it will have to go to the Boundary Commission for a decision on the feasibility of the annexation itself, and before it can come back to the City Council. If no petition is filed, there would be, then we would start where the applicant would then submit to us what we call a general development plan and a zone change application. Next slide. How we review general development plans. We start with our development review committee. We work with the developer on the design, the layout, the architectural proposals, the open space, trails, streets, alignment, all of the things that you would think about when you are evaluating a development is the review that would go into that place, into this step 6, what I call A6. On step A7, the Planning Commission would hold a public hearing. There would be a 14-day notice. And based upon that public hearing and feedback from the Planning Commission, they would either table it and ask for additional changes, or they may make a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council would then consider the general development plan for approval. If the general development plan was approved, which is basically the concept and the types of architecture that we're going to have, and the types of fencing, and we go to what kind of trails are going to be there, what kind of fences, how wide the roads are going to be. We try to cover an entire spectrum of things that we want to see in that general development plan. If the City Council accepts that, then we would go back to the Planning Commission for a consideration of the rezone, a consideration of the proposed development agreement that staff would draft, and we would put in all of the terms of the development agreement, what expectations we have on the developer, what that architecture will look like, what the open space will be look like, who will maintain that open space, what improvements will be required, and what the overall density of the project will be. We would then prepare the land use ordinances that are associated with the annexation and prepare zoning map amendments for consideration. And the Planning Commission would all consider that in step A9. In step A10, the City Council would then consider the annexation ordinance, the zone map amendments, and the code amendments, along with the annexation and development agreements. So as you can see, this is a really long process. There are lots of opportunities in this process for public input, and we are anxious to have that public input and make this a good process for everyone. We have a lot of things to consider, and I know that's what this webinar is about, to identify the entities that we need to speak with, from the Salt Lake City Airport Authority to mosquito abatement to fire, sewer, and water. We have a lot of things that need to be addressed in order to decide if this is a development that the City Council would like to have annexed into their city. We have prepared on our website, and Dorothy is going to share that, or Angie will share that on our city webpage. I didn't get it in the slide. I didn't quite have that page ready when the slides were required to be turned in, but we do have that up and live. It is a webpage that identifies this process, identifies where we are in the process, and a repository where we will post documents as they become available, as we get the different studies in and the final analysis of those studies. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to you, Dorothy, unless you have any additional comments, or perhaps if the city manager or mayor would like to say anything about the process to this point.
So this is Mayor Arvey. I don't know that I have particularly a lot to say other than this is very early in the process, and we're getting information from various sources. A lot of it is conflicting. And so, you know, we just need a chance to have the studies done and look at it before we can really make a decision at all. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you, Sherry. Dorothy, if you have those questions prepared.
Yes. So the first question that we have here relates to property near the Legacy Nature Preserve. The question is, was currently developed properties south of Center Street also once part of the Legacy Nature Preserve?
The answer to that, but I think it is no. I think the answer is no, but I couldn't answer that definitively without doing some research.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, if it's part of the nature preserve, I think that's all protected by contract. I may be wrong, but I believe it's protected by contract anyway, so no development would be able to be done there.
So that the question of the Legacy Nature Preserve and how it might be impacted would be something that the annexation study should probably address and clarify on that. The other question that we have here is that public health relates, the other question relates to the annexation study. The question is the public health burden included in the cost analysis? Putting houses on a freeway and next to an airport have elevated health risks. So could someone from maybe from the consultants respond to that? TJ?
Yeah, so that's something we can look at and determine if it is indeed part of the cost. I think that'd be something that we'd include in our report, that it is a public health burden. We have not foreseen about estimating the cost of that, but that's something that we can look at.
Dorothy, this is Ken Leatham, the city manager. I think the simplest answer is to right now, the contract we have with the consulting group does not include an analysis of the health impacts of being near a freeway or an airport. I think those are good items and good questions to consider. And there will be additional consideration of many questions that are currently outside of the scope of the annexation study that Lewis Young is performing on behalf of the city. So I would say that during this process, those are relevant and good questions to answer, but may not be answered in this contract we have with Lewis Young at this time.
And one of the things that would be helpful from the consultants is if there are, we will be sending you the comments and questions that people raise. If it's not something that's part of the scope of work that you're being contracted to respond to, if you could identify those questions and how you would recommend in the future those be handled, that would be very helpful. And we appreciate North Salt Lake following up on these. I think that's the real basis of why we're here today. The next question that I have here is, how is the traffic going in and out of the development area going to be addressed when two different cities will be involved?
So Dorothy, the answer to that is that we don't know. That's one of the reasons that we're doing the studies, to identify those issues. Certainly North Salt Lake has other neighbors that are in Davis County where we share streets or streets cross our city boundaries. And we work with our neighbors to develop agreements for maintenance. And that is our intent at this point. If this is annexed, we would then entertain those agreements with both Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City as we work to come to agreements as to what the street right of way width should be. We want to have a a system that doesn't change from one jurisdiction to the next, that you have the same quality of street as you move from our city into the next city, hopefully. So that's something that we will be considering, but we do not have the answers to that at this point in the process.
And is that something that is part of the annexation study? Or is that?
Yes,
something-
we'll be studying the transportation impacts. Absolutely.
The other question I have here is on the annexation map or the map of the annexation plan, there's an area that has a question mark on it. Small area. And the question is, why does it have a question mark and how far does it extend?
So that map was a map that I created with the for a city council meeting earlier this year, where I was putting question marks on certain properties for to get feedback from the city council to say, hey, is this an area that we want to keep on the plan, or is this an area that we want to add to the plan? It's not a question that has been answered. It's just a location that we should probably look at, whether we want to take it off or add it to it. So we have several of those places on the map that have question marks, and it's just something that we need to discuss.
By chance, do you know how big of a piece of property that actually is?
Could we go back to that map? I believe it's slide maybe 4 or 5, right there. So if you look at the question in the mark in the lower left-hand side, you can see that it's currently colored that orangey beige color, and it's in annexation area A. So the reason that I put a question mark on that was because the property itself is that park that Salt Lake County owns, the motocross park, I believe is what it is. And so I was wondering if it should remain in our annexation declaration, or if we should remove it from it, because it's obviously not going to be a development parcel. It's across the river from the city. There's no direct access from Redwood Road to that property. It doesn't really make sense in my eyes when I look at it that it should be in our annexation declaration. So that question mark was there to ask the question, should we consider taking this off the annexation declaration now?
Thank you. Thank you. We have about 8 minutes left of this question and answer part. And one of the questions that came up had to do with the schools.
Both school districts are an affected entity, both the Granite School District and the Davis County School District. And so both of those entities will be contacted and will be giving us input to be analyzed.
Okay, and that the issue of the schools is a very major one. I think it'll be discussed in more detail during the panel discussions. So just be aware that 3 of the 10 impacted entities that we have mentioned are school districts: Granite School District, Davis School District, and Salt Lake City School District. So it's quite a complex issue, and we didn't put a representative from the schools on the panels per se, because it could have taken up the entire panel discussion. So, but we will be discussing it later. The next question that we do have here is, would the scope of interests affected, okay, this has to do with the study, the annexation study, where it talks about the need to address the scope of interests. So with the annexation study, under scope of interest, address the following: would the scope of interest affected by the annexation be considered to include adjacent duck clubs and habitats for the Great Salt Lake waterfowl and wildlife?
I would like it to, yes. I want to identify all of the affected entities and get feedback from anyone in the area that has something that they can offer. We certainly are willing to take a look at any information that's available to us.
So TJ, is there some, if there's people listening to this that want to provide some input about the Great Salt Lake Habitat or the adjacent duck clubs, how would they go about contacting you?
I think they would submit that through the city, and then the city would then submit it to TJ. The reason that it's important that the information come into the city is because it all becomes part of the public record. And so while the consultants will have a copy of everything that comes in, we want to maintain the repository of that data as it comes in so that we maintain the proper public record. So if you send them to us at North Salt Lake, to myself or to our long range planner, Allie Avery. And you'll see on our website, on our webpage, that there are links to my email address and hers, as well as our phone numbers.
Sherry, thank you so much for that. That was a very good explanation here. I have a follow-up question here. And again, it goes back to explaining the red area marked in with a exclamation, with a question mark in the upper left and its size. I know you explained part of it, but if you could go back over it, not everybody fully understood what that was about.
The red area that's above the proposed area D. So that was the area that I was asking a question, did the city council want us to include that in the study? It's not included in the study, but it was a question at that previous meeting where I was just wondering, do you want to think about more than just area D, or should we just look at area D? So we're just looking at area D.
And the part in red is the motorsports park?
No, the part that was the motorsports park is in the lower left-hand corner where it's kind of that orangey color.
Okay.
And there's some crosshatch over that. And there is no area in area D that's currently within the Legacy Nature Preserve. All of that is to the, is on the east side of the Jordan River. At least in this location of North Salt Lake. So you can see the aqua green color all the way to our boundary on the east side of the Jordan River. That is all the Legacy Nature Preserve north of Center Street, except the portion owned by the sewer district plant.
So that would be part of those adjacent properties that would be addressed in the annexation study, is that?
Well, I mean, we will receive comments from them, absolutely, because they're within the distance, as proximity from that, but it's not part of, we're not considering putting that on the map.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We have about 2.5 minutes here before we go to our first panel. Is there someone here? Yes.
We did have another question come through just now. So would you like us to use that 2.5 minutes for that question?
Why don't you go ahead with that?
Okay. So the question says, the blueprint Jordan River recommends a 300-foot natural buffer between the river and areas of development in this area, and the use of this buffer to preserve and improve wildlife habitat. North Salt Lake has informally adopted the blueprint Jordan River through its resolution to participate in the Jordan River Commission. Is it the intent of North Salt Lake to work to implement this improved natural buffer?
Yes, we are very open to working with the Jordan River Commission. And I've had a couple conversations myself with Soren, as well as the developer has met with him to address some of those concerns. And that's why I was highlighting earlier that the concept plan that the developer is proposing may not look like the final plan that comes out, because we haven't done any of that. I haven't thrown any darts at it and said, you need to change this, you need to fix that. Let's address this that's from the Jordan River Commission. So all of those pieces of the puzzle still have to come together. First, we want to make sure that even annexing it is a good idea if it makes sense to the city council before we do a lot more work revising plans and analyzing how the plans fit in with this plan and that plan. We're just not at that stage to look at that in depth.
Thank you. One other comment that came through here is that it would be really helpful, perhaps early in the process before things get misunderstood, and that is to maybe to do some sort of a quick tour of the areas, the Legacy Nature Preserve and the duck clubs and that. There appears to be some disagreement about where people think the boundaries are and so forth. That could be easily clarified if the city was willing to put something together like that.
I'm willing to meet with any of those stakeholders and property owners out in that area that would like to show me around the property. I'll bring some bug spray and wear my hiking boots.
Well, we were going to ask the mosquito abatement district to be on the panel, but the panels were getting pretty big. So that may be something that you want to follow up with them since
Certainly, yeah.
fire. Yeah.
And that's one of the questions that we need answered. What will happen if we annex it? Will it stay in Salt Lake mosquito abatement, or would Davis County mosquito abatement cover it? We're just not sure of what the answers are to those questions are. So that's part of the study.
So with that, I'll close out this Q&A session here, and let's go to our first panel. So our first panel is one of agency perspective. And so basically we have asked for four people representing the agency's perspective from a county perspective, city perspective, the airport perspective, and also a state perspective. So we're very, very pleased that all four of these people agreed to be with us this evening. And what we basically want to do is focus during this time on the multi-jurisdictional concerns. I mean, those are concerns that there are impacts across jurisdictions. North Salt Lake is really not in a position to handle and totally control those issues. And they're going to need all of our help to do that. So we're going to focus on that. And we asked each of the panelists here to take about 3 minutes to talk about the issues that they see are currently unresolved and need to be addressed during this rather lengthy process, and could be addressed in the annexation plan or in later parts of the annexation. So with that, I'll start out with our representative from Salt Lake County, Councilman at Large, James Bradley. He was formerly a commissioner of Salt Lake County and has a very in-depth understanding of Salt Lake County government and of the issues there. So with that, Councilman Bradley, take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And you can hear me, I presume?
Yes.
Okay, I'll presume everybody can hear me. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Michelle on what I thought was a comprehensive and excellent presentation. Or excuse me, not Michelle, Sherry. I'm sorry. Well done. And then, you know, a lot of the questions that I was going to raise have been raised in the presentation. And that's why I thought Sherry's presentation was so excellent, that she hit on all the issues that are issues. How do we deal with the special service districts, the school districts, how we accommodate these people, and how do we execute interlocal agreements if they're necessary, et cetera, et cetera. But they have a very good handle on the challenge there. I had a couple, I'm going to talk in more of a broad area. I opposed the annexation both times the council did it, and I did it not because I thought it was a bad development necessarily, because I think it's an excellent group that's putting it together, and I thought that it's been approached in a good way. But there are some concerns that I still think are lingering out there, and specifically, as a county, Salt Lake County councilman, I have to look at our constituents, which in this particular case would be Salt Lake City, and what is their thought on this? And I think the airport clearly has to be addressed. And I don't know if those have been truly addressed to my satisfaction, at least. Secondly, I think that we need to look at the impacts in the general area of the Northwest Quadrant. We have a lot going on. We have a prison being built. We have the expansion of the airport, a tremendous asset, but also a tremendous expense. And then we have the inland port, and I think that's still a black hole. We have no idea how that's going to shape up at this point. Maybe Jack will correct me on that later, but we'll see. Anyway, and the county abdicating planning responsibility in that particular area, which we chose to do by and large, how does that relate in terms of us still being players in the things that are important? Because what happens across the river is still going to impact Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City. How do we deal with that? What type of presence will we have once this is executed, and if it does go forward? For instance, the environmental issues regarding the wetlands and the duck or the fowl and bird migratory patterns and assets that we have out there. What about the transportation and how it does? Boy, the transportation, so that means my 3 minutes is up, but I'll turn this off real quick. There we go, excuse me. Transportation's an issue, the airport's an issue. All those things are issues. I just get worried that Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City will not have the presence necessary to be able to affect the positive changes that we see will need to take place if this annexation goes through. I think that all the people are working in the right direction and with the right spirit, so it's achievable. It clearly is, but I'm not sure we've come to that conclusion. And North Salt Lake has said too, this is not a done deal. We haven't presented it to our council. We haven't done our planning or due diligence. So I'll look forward to seeing how that transpires. Thank you.
Councilman Bradley, thank you so much for your comments. And if you have questions for Councilman Bradley, do put those in the chat or the Q&A. And make sure you identify that's who you want to answer it. From there, let's go into our next panelist, Nick Norris. Nick is the planning director for Salt Lake City. Nick,
Hi,
your turn.
thank you. So I wasn't going to focus too much on what has already been said, except for some of the multi-jurisdictional issues that we see in Salt Lake City's philosophy on development and how it occurs and how it's paid for. I think everyone agrees that the corridor, 2200 West corridor, is going to be developed and it's going to change. And that creates a bunch of different issues, especially when now, if this were to go through and end up occurring, we have 3 different jurisdictions all along the same road, the same stretch of road, and we kind of leapfrog each other and things like that. And so I think the future of 2200 West, the street and all the utilities and everything else that go into there, who provides emergency services, which are all part of that annexation study that's going on. But those are significant issues for Salt Lake City. One of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit more about was some of the Salt Lake City's experience with development around the airport and what that means and what we've seen over the years. And I don't want to steal any of the thunder from Brady, who's going to talk more about that. But I think it's important to note that historically Salt Lake City has removed residential uses from within a few miles of the runways on the south because of the impact it has long-term on residential uses and people living there. And there's a number of air quality studies around other airports in the country that have indicated the potential unhealthy exposure from flight paths. And one of the questions earlier was whether it was appropriate in this location. And I think those studies provide some pretty good guidance. Obviously, Salt Lake International is different than LAX. It's different than the other major study that I am aware of at SeaTac up in the Seattle area. But what those studies show is that the health exposures extend significantly away from those runways. And in LA, it's as much as 10 miles. It's less up in SeaTac, probably due to the number of flights and the busyness of that airport. But those are certainly things that need to be considered for future land use. And some of the reasons why in Salt Lake City, we have not allowed residential uses in close proximity to the airport. And so it's the sound issues that Brady's probably going to talk a lot about. But along those lines, there's a lot of things that we also consider for things like even hotels and things like that, that add to the construction costs and development costs, the building materials, air handling systems, window quality, the level of insulation, all makes it so that those places can provide the quality of, in this case, hotels stay. And then some of the residential uses that have been longstanding in those areas that have been rebuilt to make sure that they're livable for the people to be there. The other major concern we have is with access to daily needs and services, proximity to schools. I know that site plan showed a charter school. I'm not sure where the closest public school in the Davis School District is, but I'm pretty sure the closest schools are in the Salt Lake City School District. What kind of impacts those have, which also would hopefully be addressed in that annexation study, but also the long-term compatibility of the future development that's on land within Salt Lake City. Our master plans for the area identify it mostly as business park because of the nature of living next to those, next to the runways or in the flight paths. And that's something that we're concerned about and would like to see considered as whatever happens along the corridor is developed.
So Nick, thank you so much for your comments. I'm sure that people will have a lot of questions for you. So again, you can put those in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get back with Nick and answering those. Our next person is Brady Fredrickson. Brady is the Senior Aviation Planner with the Salt Lake International Airport Authority. Brady, are you there?
I'm here. Thank
Okay, I
you.
think Brady, being the planner that he is, has PowerPoints to talk to.
You have to bring slides if you're, the planner of the airport. A lot of the points I'm going to make, I've been over in different public meetings, but first I do want to echo Councilman Bradley's remarks regarding the informative presentation that North Salt Lake gave, because that was absolutely very well done. Thank you very much. I want to thank West Point for putting this on because there's some issues that the airport has. Nick has graciously gone over a few of those, but if you'll go to the next slide, these are my major points that I want to talk about. One is, as you know, that this affects the airport. What it does is by annexing outside of Salt Lake County, it gets this development outside of the overlay zone, the airport overlay zone. The airport overlay zone is designed to do three things. It's to provide safety, operational capacity, and efficiency and noise. Okay. If you'll just go, we'll stay here for just 1 second. The thing that I really want to, I'm going to hit more about operational capacity and efficiency right now than noise, because there's been some misinformation outside of in the public of how operations work and how this development will absolutely could diminish or the capacity of the runways and the efficiency of the runways. But first, I want to just hit on safety for a minute. We saw what happened in West Jordan. We've seen what happened in Ogden, where aircraft have unfortunately hit residential developments. Those crashes were closer they were closer to the airport than this development, but those are private small planes. We fly very fast, very large aircraft. And so our safety zones are actually bigger, and we want to protect the uses on the ground. One of the biggest keys to that airport overlay zone and the rural nature of the development in keeping residential into ag districts is it limits the population that lives underneath these critical flight paths. Okay, so second, will you go to the next slide? So here's a really kind of a big thing that I'm concerned about and that needs to really be addressed. And I'm happy that I'll be able to talk to North Salt Lake about this. But I've seen two studies and some replies by the developer. One is they had a reply to a letter written by Mayor Mendenhall for the council, and they talked about a 3:30 departure and how it was required, and this 3:30 departure would then take aircraft away from the development. Their noise study by Trinity Consultant actually focused heavily on that noise study. It actually said to aid in compliance that we were realigning a runway to aid in compliance with this 3:30 departure. Now, first of all, we don't align runways for departure procedures. It's done by wind. But the most concerning and alarming thing about that noise study is it says you need to realign your runway to move it away from this development. Now, the master plan says that we are going to realign that runway, but not until after over 455,000 operations. We've already done 455,000 operations, so it's actually outside this window. Now, the biggest point I want to make, and I'm going to show you this 3:30 departure if you'll go to that next slide. So the 3:30 departure is devastating to the capacity and efficiency of the runways. As a matter of fact, if the 3:30 departure was actually implemented, you probably wouldn't be seeing the development that you see at the airport, because what that does is it says the red lines are showing the 3:30 departure that they're talking about, and it's all through the developer's process. The 3:30 departures are the red lines. So in essence, what happens is the aircraft on the east runway takes off, and the aircraft on the center runway has to hold, and the aircraft on the west runway would have to hold. So basically, it's a domino effect of aircraft idling, and the deficiency or capacity dramatically reduced. So bad so that if you'll go to the next slide, that 9 months. So the developers really hit on this record of approval that was done in 1999, September of 1999. That 3:30 heading had such a dramatic reduction in departure procedures that it was rewritten 9 months later to enhance the capacity of the airport. And the reason we were able to rewrite it is because we were not flying over residential development. We're not flying near homes and residents. We have to preserve that. We have to preserve the asset of the airport. The airport put in this new development, we've put $5.5 billion into the local economy. Now, this is what it says right here at the bottom, where that is the highlight. It says, when practical, all jets are given an initial departure heading of 260 to 340. When practical, with that, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So we're, no, well, I mean, we don't have any questions right now coming in on your presentation, because it's just so crystal clear, I'm assuming, and that's why nobody's.
Yeah. Just let me wrap this up, Dorothy.
But I just want to give you a little warning to kind of, because this is certainly really important information, things that will be I'm sure the.
Okay. I appreciate it. I'm done, Dorothy. But what this does is, because we have no development, we're able to operate the airport at its maximum capacity. How are we going to do that? How are we not going to turn out like a Denver Stapleton that had to move because of development pressures? Las Vegas right now is looking at a different airport to relieve development pressure. If we allow the growth to creep in on the airport and skirt around these airport overlay zones, how are we protecting the asset of the airport? How are we going to protect it in the future? It's a great economic engine to the state. How do we need to preserve it? And I look forward to working with the developers and North Salt Lake in addressing some of these issues.
Brady, so we have a question for you here.
Appreciate it.
And the question is, how many, let's see. The question is, how many years will it be before this east runway will be used?
Will be what?
How
Used?
many years will it be before this east runway will be used?
Okay, so the east runway is being used today. As a matter of fact, the maximum capacity of this airport is having the east runway do commercial operations straight out. They do a straight out heading, climb to 11,000 feet and turn east. The center runway climb straight out and turn west and land on the west runway. That is the maximum capacity of the airport right now. I think what they're saying is how many operations before the east runway would need to be realigned. And so that would be somewhere we are doing a master plan right now, and we're actually going to do as much infrastructure as we can to enhance the operations. It's actually outside the window of the master plan, which is 20 years plus.
Brady, thank you so very much for that.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate this.
And if people want to get a hold of you,
Yep.
that they can, you can put your contact information in the chat box and
Perfect.
everyone will be able to see it.
Dorothy, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So we've talked about concerns with the roadway. We've talked about concerns with the airport. And now we're going to ask Jack Hedge, who is the Executive Director of the Utah Inland Port Authority, to talk about the impact that that special jurisdiction will have on 2200 West and also on this development, given the tremendous scope of the Inland Port Authority. So with that, Jack, thank you so much for joining with us. And take it away.
Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you for asking us to participate in this tonight. And first of all, I'd like to say again to North Salt Lake, great presentation, very thorough analysis and evaluation being done. And we think you're doing a tremendous job in looking at this. I'll echo some of the others comments too made by Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, and the airport about some of the concerns and questions we have. Ours are very similar in that regard, and they really do go to the impact on infrastructure, particularly traffic, roadway infrastructure, and future congestion issues around 2200 West primarily. We have a bit of jurisdictional area along 2200 West, running adjacent to the airport on the east side. That area is sort of designated for airport services, companies that service the airport, companies that are engaged in air cargo operations and those kinds of things. But our jurisdiction stops at about that level. However, going north from that, there are industrial users, the business park users that Salt Lake City has permitted in that area, and that crossing of residential traffic on top of that industrial traffic, that commercial traffic that goes into and out of the north end of the airport, and that those business park areas north of the port jurisdiction area, those would be areas of concern, of course. So are there opportunities to deconflict those things, perhaps to route residential traffic away from those more commercial and industrial uses? That would be something that I think would be of interest. And two, also the impact on other types of infrastructure. Utility infrastructure, those types of things, of course, are a concern. And making sure that the planning incorporates those needs from industrial and commercial users, as well as from the residential needs going into that area. Those are the kinds of things that we'd be, want to take a look at and have concerns about. And then as well, one of the things we are acutely aware of with the Inland Port, and that we're trying to address with the Inland Port, and we certainly would want to see addressed in this area, are impacts to habitat areas, to wildlife areas, wetlands, impacts in particular there with the duck clubs and some of the other waterfowl habitat areas, the Legacy Parkway Nature Preserve as a potential impact area, but also what lighting and noise abatement issues would be addressed Lighting has a big impact on birds, particularly migratory birds. So seeing that some of those things are addressed and taken into account as well. So those are some of the things that we see that we would like to see as part of the discussion, and that we would be open to participating in and helping in any way we can in those regards. So thank you, Dorothy. Thanks for having us be part of this, and available to take any questions that might come up.
Jack, thank you so very much. Let me check what I've got here. So the question I think we could probably ask right now is, let's see. Oh, here we are. So this question, Jack, is directed to you. How is the Inland Port Authority protecting wildlife habitat generally and within its jurisdictional area?
So we've done things like create buffers, working with Salt Lake City. There's a natural area, a buffer, several thousand acre buffer that has been created along the northern edge of the development boundary of the Port Authority, working with property owners there to try to secure that into perpetuity and get compatible uses in that natural area, and so that we create that buffer, significant buffer between development activity and those natural areas. That is one of the things we're doing, as well as creating policies and programs that deal with issues such as lighting, such as stormwater runoff, such as noise attenuation, noise abatement, things like that, because those have direct impacts on those habitat areas, as well as on the communities around that surround the inland port. So those things are being done very purposefully, very intentionally, and some of those practices could well be integrated into this planning as well.
Thank you, Jack. Is there any planning efforts within the Inland Port Authority that you would want to refer the North Salt Lake to work with, or the consultants to work with?
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to make our consultants available for you in terms of how cargo flows and traffic routing and things like that we're looking at in those regards, as well as some of the studies and some of the things that we're doing in terms of abatement measures around some of these lighting issues and noise issues and some of those kinds of things. Be more than happy to make those available to North Salt Lake as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jack. Okay, and with that, we'll go to our second panel. The second panel is basically providing a public perspective. And we asked the four participants here the same question: what issues still need to be addressed? And we asked someone from North Salt Lake City, someone from West Point, right on 2200 West, and also from the unincorporated area. So with that, we thought it was most appropriate to start with Steve Acey. Steve lives in North Salt Lake. He's a resident of Foxborough and has been a member of North Salt Lake's, let me see if I get this right, Parks, Arts, Recreation, and Trails Advisory Board. So it has a good sense of what goes on in North Salt Lake, and it's also a very agreeable man and agreed to participate with us today. So Stephen, take it away.
Yes, as I am a member, I've been living with my family in Foxborough for 10 years. We built within the Foxborough community. I was asked to attend a presentation by the developer, by Council Member Mumford from North Salt Lake, to get a community perspective. There were quite a few questions I had for the developer. This has already been raised, is concerning education. One of the issues that most concern me is this development. This is currently part of Salt Lake County. As such, it falls under Grant School District, with the schools right now being Magna Junior High and Cypress High School, where children would have to be bused. There is a proposal for a charter school. In the proposed, of what it looks like, I've been informed that the charter school's actually been plans to be moved further from 215, where it sits now, closer to 2200 West. One of the things that, you know, is a concern is that with that education is that while the charter school is supposed to handle the community that is being built right here from Misty River, it doesn't really account for what the future development, I believe, of the Cross E for homes being developed there. One of the things is that, you know, you might ask that couldn't people here open enroll into the Davis system. As it stands now, the Davis school system is full. The elementary schools cannot take any more. The closest ones for Foxborough or Odyssey. The junior highs, there's not an open enrollment space. That could change in the future. What that leaves then is either the residents would either have to attend the charter school that is in the community. They could possibly open enroll in other charter schools that are close to the community. They could be bused into Magna to go to the public schools there as part of Granite School District, or they could try to open enroll in the Salt Lake School District, either into Rose Park for elementaries there, or the nearest high school would be West. So those are concerns. You know, with busing, if there's going to be a lot of open enrollment, that can be a real issue for parents who are deciding whether or not to move in this community and not necessarily knowing what challenges they may face on education when considering this. I am really concerned that I don't think that the charter school will be able to meet the capacity needs once the Cross E area is developed with homes as well. I am also really concerned about traffic. With the expansion of 2200 West, there is a lot of commercial development that is from 2100 North, and I think that's going to continue. So you have a lot of commercial traffic as well as residential. The other option is Center Street, exiting at Redwood Road. Right now, we have continued to have a lot of commercial development there with the new Amazon distribution center. I think that's potentially caused some concerns as that continues to be expanding. There are new businesses going in. And I don't think, you know, as I've understood, the road really isn't at capacity to really take the increased traffic. And that would be part of course, part of the study. There are some benefits, of course. You know, we have businesses along Redwood Road that are in need of increased traffic. Please, grocery store. I think we're going to be able to getting some of that from the increased development in Woods Cross. I think this will help, but you know, I don't necessarily, as a small community, do I want to see a lot of more commercial development along Redwood Road. I think we have sufficient, and those are some of my concerns. I also, you know, do have concerns about developers that, you know, you have proposals, and as time goes on, those things change. We've seen that with some of the developers within North Salt Lake that originally proposed certain developments, and they changed into be high density apartments. You know, speaking with the developer, that's not that they did change. I know from what they originally planned for the area, but as a resident, that does concern me.
So Steve, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Now I can thank you. Thank you so much. Very helpful, very knowledgeable. And we look forward to working with North Salt Lake and the other residents on this project. With that, I want to go now to Richard Holman. Richard Holman is the president of the West Side Coalition. The West Side Coalition is founded in a collaborative effort of the 6 community councils on the west side of Salt Lake City, and also includes other West Side organizations as part of their board to give a broader perspective on the issues. So with that, Richard, I'll let you take it away also.
Thank you, Dorothy. I really appreciate that. In looking at this this activity, one of the things that is clear to me and clear to many of the members of our West Side Coalition is that this is not a North Salt Lake project. This is a regional project. This has a lot of holistic implications with respect to regional impacts. And these collective impacts that wouldn't possibly exist on an individual basis, when you put everything together, create quite an issue for, I believe, the West Side communities. This is going to require a great deal of communication and collaboration amongst the developers to include the Amazon warehouse, the prison, the inland port, the Misty River development, and everything else that's going on in that particular area. And I would like to encourage all of those people who are part of the development effort to sit down and maybe even put together some type of a formal working group that will look at the impact when you collect all of the data about the intent of the development, no matter what it is, and how it will impact not just North Salt Lake, but the routes south are definitely going to be impacted. People are going to travel south. The commerce is south. Obviously, there's some north. There's some east. But we are going to impact our roads. And the roads 22 West and Redwood Road are unfortunately in Salt Lake City. And therefore, the taxpayers of Salt Lake City are impacted by the repair and upkeep, expansion potential on those roads. And there will be expansion needed because those roads are insufficient right now to accommodate the anticipated traffic. I would be very interested to see the traffic study. I know that the developer has one, but I would ask that it consider all of the other implications, not just the development at Misty River, but all the other implications tied to the other development efforts going on there. Commerce and shopping, I think, is another issue. If you look at communities like Reston, Virginia, as an example, which was a planned community and how it was laid out, it was planned initially so that everyone had access to the services and commerce they needed in a very structured and systematic way. That is not the case now. Medical services, how many people can they actually handle adjacent to these developments? I don't know what the medical facilities look like, but I suspect that they're probably not sufficient given the times that we live in right now. The flu, the pandemic, other issues, I think we need to evaluate the medical services that may have been done, but I didn't see it. And then public transportation. I understand that the potential exists to work with UTA to extend a line north. But that is a nice, that's a nice thought, but where is the activity? Because having this additional input of cars, we have 994 units in Misty River. And we don't know how many additional units will be a part of Crossy Ranch. That's been undefined. That may be, another 300-400 units relative to the original count that we had with Misty River of 1180. So I'm kind of wondering about how that's going to unfold. The issue of public transportation needs to be addressed. Now, some of these, I would say, can be addressed in a collaborative method with the developers and should be. And then the whole school impact issue, I see that as being extremely unresolved and needs to be. In conclusion, some things have to be left to the prospective residents to decide if there's sufficient resource to warrant living there. But price trumps all. And I think we have to be cautious in ensuring that we've got the right infrastructure and the right working relationships to bring this to closure. Thank you, Dorothy, and thanks to North Salt Lake.
Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate that. Our next speaker is Denise Payne. Denise, can you hear me? Denise? Where are you, Denise? Denise, I need you to unmute yourself.
I am unmuted, but I can't,
there you are.
can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Denise. Denise has graciously agreed to represent kind of the people who live in West Point along 2200 West. She's lived in that area for over 30 years and is very knowledgeable of the community. And so I'll turn it over to you. And you've been involved with this for over a year now. So Take it away.
Yes, we have, and I've been working with the residents as much as possible. We're all very concerned, especially living on 2200 West. We're already being impacted with the change with trucks on Legacy and the M1 buildings at the end of our street. It's horrible to try and live out here on this little 2-lane road and have all of these semis going up and down our road. It shakes our houses. It's that bad. And all of us are concerned if there's more entities involved in this area. Right now, we're Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County. If North Salt Lake gets involved also, not to mention all the school districts, which we all have concerns about the school districts and what's going to happen. North Salt Lake may take on this annexation, but they want Salt Lake City to still take care of 2200 West. When North Salt Lake is getting property taxes, 2200 West is still in Salt Lake City. So it's going to be up to Salt Lake City to widen the road, repair the road, not to mention sewer connections. Right now, we're all on septic tanks. We have no cable, which is fine. I'm happy with my septic tank, but I also don't want to be required to hook into your sewer system if you bring it out here, if it does happen. Some of the other concerns with everyone are the public health concerns for the development. It's too much for this area, and the environmental impacts. We've already lost so many deer out here that we used to have, and other wildlife, not to mention all the birds, because of the development that's going on. Right now, Dominion Energy has built a huge buildings just down the street from me. There won't be people going in and out of there, but there's trucks going up and down the road all the time, and they've already impacted the wildlife in this area. We don't have the infrastructure, and to divide it up into 10 more, or how many more cities, counties, it's just going to make a mess of everything. And I understand that Crossy Ranch really wants a septic tank. I don't understand why they can't get a septic tank so they can do their programs, but they're so wonderful for the public, and keep the open space. There's just too much pollution as it is. And the more we bring in out here, the worse the pollution is going to get. And it is bad in our area because we're lower. The wetlands, everything. I would like all of these issues looked at. And if you've never been out here, take a drive up and down our road, especially on a Friday, and check out the traffic. Just see what we have out here. A huge development like this is going to impact not only us, but it's going to impact Salt Lake City, the wildlife, the noise from the airport, everything.
Denise,
And I think
thank
I've
you so
pretty
very
much, we've
much.
already covered quite a few of the concerns that we had.
Well, and thank you. And I think we're starting to get some questions here, so we may come back to you on some of these things. So again, thank you, Denise.
Okay.
So our last panelist is Jack Ray. Jack, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Jack is the president of the Utah Waterfowl Association. The Utah Waterfowl Association includes a number of the duck clubs in the area who are also property owners in unincorporated Salt Lake County. So Jack, do you have another perspective on this that hasn't been yet? So can you take it from here?
Yeah, thank you, Dorothy. It's really, I'm glad I have the opportunity to talk to people about this, because the area we're talking about is one of the most sensitive and significant from an ecological perspective areas on the Great Salt Lake. What a lot of people don't realize is that 90% of the bird life on the Great Salt Lake concentrates along the eastern shoreline of the lake. And one of those of specific concentration is just really a stone's throw from where this annexation area is being proposed. Many of those areas have been managed under a very careful stewardship for well over a century by private parties. And it forms part of not only the wildlife habitat in the area, but also a cultural heritage that's unique to this particular area. Having this type of high density residential development in that area poses the risk of having a very significant negative impact on the wildlife values. Many of the birds that use this area and other wildlife are very sensitive to the level of human activity that would come with this kind of development and the concentration of people with all of the impacts that that brings. There are types of development that are more suitable, that are less disruptive. But unfortunately, this type of dense residential development is among the most disruptive for the wildlife in the area and for the legacy uses of the area. There have been efforts undertaken in connection with the inland port, in connection with other development projects such as the Legacy Highway, to provide buffers, significant buffers, because of the recognition of the hemispheric value of these wetlands along the southern and southeastern shore of the Great Salt Lake. These are areas that can't be relocated, they can't be replicated, and their role in the ecosystem for bird populations that extend from the Arctic to Argentina is really unparalleled. And all of those considerations need to be taken into account. There are things that can be done with this property, and we would encourage the owners and the potential developers to look at other options that would allow them to develop this property in a manner that's more consistent with the sensitive nature of the area.
Jack, thank you so very, very much. So we have a number of questions here that have come on as our webinar has gone on. So let me start with one that is kind of open to a number of people. So Jack, are you muted?
I'm on now.
Okay, but I need you to mute yourself. Because I'm gonna, okay, well, I don't know who's gonna answer. Oh, well, no, I'll start with you, Jack. That's a good idea. Okay, so the question is, and this is for everybody, do you feel a business park with warehouses and light manufacturing that is currently allowed across the street from this area is a better use of this land than clustered housing similar to the Foxborough area? And we'll start with Jack and then go to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, so I'll speak specifically in connection with the wildlife impact as opposed to impacts that may be felt more acutely by the people who are already residents in that area. But from a wildlife perspective, in terms of planning a light industrial or business park development, it's probably easier to do that in a way that would be that would mitigate the impacts somewhat. High density residential is probably, on the scale of types of development that would be most disruptive to the wildlife in the area. High density residential is on the, sort of the 8, 9, 10 range of the scale, whereas light industrial is something that from a wildlife perspective could probably be managed a little bit better.
Thank you. Denise, do you want me to repeat the question for you? Denise, I need you to unmute.
I'm here.
Okay, do you want me to repeat the question?
I'm here.
The question,
Yes, please.
yes, do you feel a business park with warehouse and light manufacturing that is currently allowed across the street from this area is a better use of this land than clustered housing similar to Foxborough?
Truthfully, I think, it would be less people for one thing, if there wouldn't be as many in there. My biggest concern is just protecting, and the residents here is protecting the open space, out here. So I'd rather, of course, we'd rather not see anything, but it would be fewer people. The number of units they're planning on putting in this development is going to overwhelm everything in this area. So a business park would be fewer people. But who knows what's going to happen with the Swanner property too? We don't know what's going to happen over there. It's still for sale. And that's something that I think needs to be considered when they're looking into all of this.
Is Jack Hedge still on? I can't quite see if he's still here. I think he was going to have to leave. Because I was going to ask Jack just what he saw, but wood warehouses actually have fewer people than residential, but that's something that can be discussed at a later time. Stephen AC? You there, Stephen?
Yeah.
Do you want to respond to that question? Want me to repeat it?
No, I'm good. My concern with a lot of the commercial development is I believe that it will even have worse impact upon the roads, especially that 90-degree curve that's connects 2200 West to Center Street. So if you continue to have commercial development move up 2200 West, as you continue to have commercial development move along Center Street, you're going to see a lot more traffic trying to make that curve at Center Street to 2200 West, and it's not going to handle large capacity vehicles. I think it'll be a danger, especially with the agri-farm that Cross C is and the amount of traffic it gets of families.
Nick, this question is for you. You there?
I'm here.
It says a lot of the concerns that are being brought up do not go away if it's developed as Salt Lake City would allow. Or do you want to comment on that? I mean,
when we get a chance, I'd like to come back to that question and have an opportunity to respond to the former question when you get a chance.
okay, well, why don't we go back to that? Oh, Richard, I'm sorry. Let's go. My error. Richard, let's go back to you and finish up on that other question. If you have a choice between this commercial development or this residential development, what's your thoughts?
Well, it's all a trade-off. If this ends up being a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation with truck traffic, that's one side of the coin. If it's residential, that has different impacts. So I think the nature of the pollutants, if you will, from truck traffic along that road and the volume of truck traffic along that road, as opposed to the residential impacts, I think that's what really has to be weighed here. And significant restrictions need to be placed on those operations that are going to be in the area to sort of level it out or reduce the impact. So, if it's 24/7 with trucks constantly in and out, we've got a problem because that's collective with all the other traffic that's 24/7 that's using that road. So I think that has to be weighed carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, you there? Can you unmute yourself?
Yep.
Okay, so, some of the issues here are concerns about residential, commercial development, and then the situation we have now, which is not an either or, but all of it together. And the comments that are coming in here are that a lot of the concerns that are being brought up do not go away if this development is allowed as Salt Lake City has allowed it currently. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think any of the issues associated with residential uses do go away, particularly the impact on the airport. And I think that's for the city, that's one of the most significant issue. And we understand that infrastructure upgrades will need to happen along that corridor, just like what's happened south of 2200 North, 2100 North, where that road's been extended, bike lanes have gone in, significant infrastructure improvements as well. And in Salt Lake, we require development to pay for development and for infrastructure as it goes. And so what that helps us do is create a more linear progression instead of a leapfrog progression. And so we don't have these gaps in development, infrastructure and things like that in between, which becomes a challenge when you have multiple jurisdictions that leapfrog each other along a road. So this road goes Salt Lake City, unincorporated county, this proposed annexation area, then back into Salt Lake City and back into unincorporated county. And so that makes it all challenging to get the infrastructure in place over time.
So Nick, can you talk a little bit about what Salt Lake City is currently doing or planning to do to help plan this development along this area?
Yeah, so
Of what happens with the annexation?
So our city council allocated some funds to update our master plan for this area, the North Point Small Area Master Plan. It's not so much looking at land use because we don't believe that we're going to see much land use change than what our current plan says, but it really is going to focus on infrastructure and mitigating impacts and making that area, particularly the impacts to the surrounding uses, the natural areas that are to the west of the Swanner property that was identified, which are outside Salt Lake City's limits, but we recognize that development impacts that, but also considering how it impacts the nearby neighborhoods as well.
Anything that you want to share with the annexation study consultants of how some of your planning and how some of their analysis might need to be coordinated?
Yeah, I think most of those issues and considerations have been identified as issues, and so I don't know that there's any reason to rehash those right now.
No, okay, I would agree. Is there a time frame that we should be aware of regarding Salt Lake City's planning efforts in this area?
Well, we're hoping to start that as soon as we possibly can. We have capacity issues right now with staff, given that we're in the largest development boom and cycle that we've ever experienced as a city. And so that's stretching our staff resources very thin. But hopefully, as we start seeing some of the existing proposals and developments and planning needs of the city get through their processes, we'll have that capacity. So hopefully then in the not too distant future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. So Angie and Allison, I'm looking over the chats. I think I've covered all the questions, but I'm not sure. Do you have some that you want to pose at this time?
Sure. So hi, I'm Angie Keaton. I'm a resident of North Salt Lake. Thank you all for your questions and for your patience with us and addressing them tonight. I do have one that refers to sewer issues. It comes from our friends living on 2200 West. If this property is annexed into North Salt Lake and you bring in the sewer with all other developments, current residents that are within 300 feet of the sewer will most likely be required to hook into that sewer at their own expense. Same issue with curb and gutter on 2200 West. Residents will be required to do improvements in front of their property. Is there anyone who might be able to kind of discuss a little bit about sewer or water as they know it to date?
Don't everybody speak at the same time. How about Dave Tolman? You there? Steve? Any of you from North Salt Lake? So
this is Steve Boccaccio. I think that's a question that North Salt Lake should handle.
okay, appreciate that.
This is Ken with North Salt Lake. The question is water and sewer service. Have I understood that correctly?
Correct.
So, so we know that the developers have been doing some infrastructure planning to support their project. We've been shown some conceptual plans for water, how water would be provided to this development. And as you heard Sherry say in her presentation, we have not reviewed those plans. We haven't acted on those plans. We have no, we don't really have an opinion on those plans at the moment. Sewer is being provided, sanitary sewer is being provided, as we understand it, by
Ken?
Yes.
This is Denise Payne. Can I explain that question a little bit better to you?
Okay.
The question was not for your project. The question was from one of the residents here on 2200 West. The property will, this development would be backing up to current residents here. And in any other developments that have happened, we aren't part of the development, but when we're within 300 feet of your development, most developers or most cities require the residents that are living that close to hook up to the sewer at their own cost. Since they aren't part of the development. Same with the curb and gutter. That's happened in quite a few developments around the area. It's up to the current property owners to pay for it themselves, whereas the development is going to be including it in their plans. Is that not correct?
So with respect to your question about sewer service, if it were to pass within 300 feet of your home, there are laws on the books, state laws and county health department laws that require people to connect to active sewer systems. So so we'd be required to comply with that. I can't tell you where those sewer lines would be at the moment because we haven't reviewed those, as I said. With respect to curb, gutter, sidewalk, the installation of those improvements is within our jurisdiction. We have ordinances that would govern that. Right now, it has not been the practice or the ordinance of North Salt Lake to install curb and gutter in front of someone's home and make them pay for it. So that has not been our practice.
So Ken, this is Mayor Arvey. I'm just, as I'm thinking about this, those homeowners I don't believe would be annexed into either South Davis Sewer or into our city. So I don't know how we would provide them services or require them to put in curb and gutter or even allow them to be into the sewer system where they're not part of the sewer district. But yeah, I don't know.
That is a subtlety in this case because most of these areas if people are not wanting to annex, they will not be forced to annex. And so, yeah, I don't know how the state law would work where we have multi-jurisdictions, but maybe a sewer line that would pass in front of someone's home in an unincorporated area. So that's a great question, Mayor, that I don't know the answer to.
But we will. We will, because we've got some great people working on these questions after this is done. So Denise, thank you for stepping in and kind of expanding on that so that we're getting to the heart of some of the issues that people had. I'm gonna have one fast question and then we're gonna kind of wrap this up with some remarks by Angie, but I think we have one question we can get in here. The question is, there is a new main road in the Salt Lake City Master Transit Plan that bisects the Swanner properties. Is this road going to be developed as part of Misty River to mitigate 2200 West traffic concerns? I don't know, maybe Nick, you can talk to this or?
Yeah, I can answer that. The answer is probably not. And the reason for that is because that road goes through what is now private property that's not part of that development. And so it would have to be essentially what's called an exaction. It'd have to be exacted out from that property, and that property owner, if they're not developing, we can't really exact from them. And so it would have to go through a eminent domain process from some jurisdiction. Because it's in Salt Lake City, that would be something that Salt Lake City would have to consider. And as far as I know, there's no plans to consider that.
Okay, so we have a couple of other questions that are pending here, it looks like. But I think what we'll end up, we're getting close to our ending time, and we'll put these, we'll take these questions and forward them on and post the answers for them. So with that, Angie, are you there?
Yes, I am here, Dorothy.
So we've got about 4 or 5 minutes here for you to wrap up.
Oh, that's fine.
And Angie really is the representation of what is now the second phase, the North Salt Lake phase of this effort. So we appreciate her leadership in helping us with this.
Oh, well, sure. Well, thank you so much, Dorothy. I want to thank all of our presenters, our panelists, our city leaders, county leaders, and residents, volunteers who took time out tonight to join us for a really educational and very, very helpful opportunity to hear where we're at in this process and how we can continue to be involved and stay up to date on next steps. And so thank you again so much to especially the team from the City Library who helped make this possible, to Dorothy, Allison, and the West Point Community Council. They have done a tremendous job in tracking this entire process and bringing together multiple stakeholders from all the different communities, from different points of view. And I just want to commend them on all their work to date. And we have shared already in the group chat for all participants how to connect with West Point's website and their historical documents that they've been keeping track of. And I have also, during Sherry's presentation, added the link for North Salt Lake's webpage that will be tracking the process going forward. So I really want to encourage those of you on the call tonight to reach out to your neighbors, to let them know that this event happened, and through the magic of this technology, which maybe we wouldn't have done if we had been having this in person, to be able to share the video and make it accessible to those who couldn't join us tonight, because I know that the thousands of residents that surround this area would appreciate having some insight. And by educating ourselves, we can help make productive progress going forward for all of our neighbors and friends. So thank you so much. So just a reminder, we recorded it. It will be available on the West Point website and can help you locate that once it's available from our friends at the library and on their Facebook page. I still manage the Save Legacy Parkway webpage, as well as am a poster to the Foxborough Community Neighborhood page. And so I'm happy to share the resources there as well. So keep up to date. North Salt Lake also has a mailing list that you can access from their main website at nslcity.org. And just continue to engage, and thank you all for your commitment to our communities and making this a fantastic place to live. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.